The modern understanding of African American heritage and identity has evolved significantly, challenging long-held narratives about their ancestry. Historically, the predominant belief was that African Americans descended solely from African slaves brought to the Americas through the transatlantic slave trade. This perspective reduced their lineage to one of foreign origin and enslavement. However, overlooked and forgotten history suggests that many African Americans have indigenous roots in the Americas, adding complexity to their heritage. Numerous indigenous tribes inhabited the Americas before European colonization, characterized by diverse physical traits, languages, and cultural practices. Among these were dark-skinned tribes such as the Yamasee, Shaka, and others in the Caribbean and South America. These communities often exhibited features, including tightly curled hair and broad facial structures, that led European colonists to mistakenly classify them as African. This misclassification erased their identity as indigenous peoples, grouping them with African slaves and relegating their heritage to obscurity. European explorers and settlers documented the diversity of Native American populations, though often through biased and racially motivated lenses. For instance, James Adair's 1775 The History of the American Indians compared the darker skin tones of some tribes to those of the Moors in Africa. Such observations, while flawed, indicate the physical diversity among indigenous populations. However, the colonial obsession with rigid racial hierarchies meant that dark-skinned Native Americans were increasingly categorized as part of the African racial group. This classification not only erased their unique identities, but also justified their enslavement alongside Africans. The conflation of dark-skinned Native Americans with African slaves served several colonial purposes. It reinforced racial hierarchies that placed Europeans at the top, facilitated the dispossession of Native Americans from their lands, and enabled the exploitation of both groups as enslaved labor. The systemic removal of their indigenous identity further entrenched the misconception that all dark-skinned individuals in America were of African origin. Records reveal that between 1492 and 1880, approximately 5.5 million Native Americans were enslaved in the Americas, alongside the 12.5 million Africans transported via the transatlantic slave trade. These two systems of enslavement were deeply interconnected. Dark-skinned Native Americans, due to their physical similarity to Africans, were often indistinguishably enslaved and sold in the same markets. This lack of distinction not only stripped them of their freedom, but also severed ties to their indigenous heritage. Today, the history of these dark-skinned indigenous tribes offers a compelling argument for re-evaluating African American ancestry. It challenges the oversimplified racial narratives imposed by colonial powers and highlights the intertwined histories of Native Americans and Africans in the Americas. Understanding this shared legacy fosters a deeper appreciation of the complex and resilient identities that make up African American heritage. The complex history of Native American and African identities in the Americas reveals the profound effects of slavery, colonization, and systemic erasure on cultural heritage and self-identification. Native Americans with darker skin tones were frequently mistaken for Africans by European settlers, leading to their enslavement and subsequent loss of cultural identity. Enslaved individuals, regardless of origin, were forced to adopt the traditions and practices of their captors, suppressing their languages and histories in the process. Slavery and cultural erasure were not confined to the English colonies. Spanish colonists, particularly in the Caribbean and South America, also enslaved significant numbers of Native Americans. Historian Andrés Resendez, in The Other Slavery, The Uncovered Story of Indian Enslavement in America, describes how the enslavement of indigenous peoples was integral to the colonial economy. The shared experience of enslavement among Africans and dark-skinned indigenous peoples often led to intermarriage, creating hybrid communities with mixed African and Native American ancestry. This blending of identities, however, became a target of systemic efforts to erase indigenous heritage. The Dawes Act of 1887, for example, was a pivotal law that aimed to assimilate Native Americans into European American society by dividing tribal lands into individual allotments. Mixed-race individuals were frequently excluded from tribal roles, effectively denying them land rights and severing their connection to Native American identity. By classifying individuals of mixed heritage as African Americans rather than Native Americans, the government facilitated the seizure of native lands and reinforced racial hierarchies. The reclassification of mixed-race individuals had far-reaching consequences. It not only displaced Native communities and stripped them of their ancestral lands, but also led to the erasure of Native American heritage within the African American population. Over time, many African Americans with Native ancestry were encouraged to identify solely with their African roots, leading to a widespread loss of awareness of this dual heritage. Despite this erasure, the physical and cultural characteristics of African Americans often reflect their diverse ancestry. Features such as straight hair, prominent cheekbones, and specific skin tones are reminders of Native American lineage, even as official histories have sought to obscure this connection. The resilience of these traits and traditions underscores the enduring presence of Native heritage within African American communities. Understanding this history challenges simplified racial narratives and highlights the shared struggles and interwoven identities of Native and African Americans. By reclaiming and acknowledging these stories, individuals can foster a deeper appreciation of the rich, multifaceted heritage that continues to shape modern identities. The narrative of African American ancestry has traditionally emphasized the transatlantic slave trade, often overshadowing the diverse and multifaceted heritage that many individuals possess. This singular focus neglects the indigenous heritage and cultural exchanges that are integral to the African American identity. Recognizing the complexity of this lineage is crucial, as it not only honors the resilience and struggles of ancestors, but also enriches our understanding of history and contemporary identity. Historical evidence points to a long history of interaction between African and Native American populations, even before European colonization. Expeditions led by African empires, such as the Mali Empire, likely facilitated transatlantic contact, leaving cultural and technological imprints on native civilizations. Archaeological findings, including similarities in agricultural practices, pottery, and architectural techniques, suggest a blending of African and indigenous influences that contributed to the development of complex societies in the Americas. The Afro-Indigenous identity within the African American community represents this intricate interplay of heritages. These identities emerge from alliances, intermarriage, and shared resistance to colonial oppression between Black and Native communities. This cultural fusion not only reflects their interconnected histories, but also highlights their collective resilience and mutual support in the face of systemic challenges. Despite this rich heritage, systemic oppression and historical erasure have often obscured Afro-Indigenous identities. Efforts such as the Dawes Act of 1887, which reclassified mixed-race individuals as African Americans rather than Native Americans, served to sever ties to indigenous ancestry and facilitate the seizure of native lands. These policies contributed to the loss of cultural identity for many and reinforced racial hierarchies that persist to this day. Today, there is a growing movement within the African American community to reclaim and celebrate these lost narratives. Genetic studies and historical research have begun to shed light on the blending of African, Native American, and European ancestries, challenging preconceived notions of identity. These revelations not only honor the diverse roots of African Americans, but also foster a deeper appreciation for the shared histories and cultural exchanges that have shaped the Americas. Acknowledging these complexities allows for a more inclusive and accurate understanding of African American identity. By celebrating Afro-Indigenous identities and their contributions, we can foster solidarity between Black and Native communities, recognizing their shared struggles and resilience. This nuanced perspective enriches our collective narrative and deepens our appreciation for the interconnectedness of cultures throughout history. Before the arrival of Columbus in 1492, millions of dark-skinned Native Americans thrived across the continent, creating vibrant societies with distinct languages, traditions, and governance systems. These populations have often been overlooked in mainstream historical accounts. European colonization and the subsequent practice of Indian slavery devastated these communities, leading to a significant loss of cultural diversity. The erasure of these groups has profoundly impacted our understanding of both Native American and African American identities. The concept of Indian slavery emerged as European settlers sought to exploit native populations for labor. In colonial America, particularly in South Carolina, thousands of Native Americans were captured and sold into slavery during the 17th and 18th centuries. Many were exported to Europe and the Caribbean, where they were subjected to brutal conditions. This enslavement, combined with disease and warfare, decimated native populations and further blurred racial and ethnic distinctions. Native individuals were often categorized as African, facilitating their enslavement and erasing their indigenous identities. The acknowledgement of these historical complexities enriches our understanding of African American heritage. It highlights the shared struggles and intertwined histories of African and Native American communities, which contributed to the rich cultural tapestry of modern African American identity. By exploring the genetic, cultural, and historical connections between these groups, we can foster a broader appreciation for the diversity within the African American experience. The history of indigenous and African populations in the Americas is one of profound resilience amidst devastating exploitation, disease, and systemic erasure. European colonization brought diseases that decimated Native American populations and introduced slavery and warfare that further dismantled their societies. Laws conscripting Native individuals into military campaigns compounded their suffering, forcing them to fight in conflicts unrelated to their communities. This combination of enslavement, disease, and conscription led to the near annihilation of many Native populations, with far-reaching consequences for their cultural and social identities. During the colonial period, intermarriage between Native American women and African slaves resulted in a significant number of mixed-race offspring. While these unions reflected cultural blending, they often obscured Native identities. Bureaucratic practices, particularly in the 19th century, categorized mixed-race individuals as colored, marginalizing their indigenous heritage and erasing their cultural ties. This misclassification entrenched racial divisions, complicating social standings and diminishing recognition of Native American ancestry. Groundbreaking genetic research has further reshaped our understanding of humanity's shared heritage. Studies of mitochondrial DNA have confirmed that all modern humans trace their origins to Africa, where the earliest humans emerged approximately 200,000 to 300,000 years ago. This genetic evidence underscores the foundational role of African features in human evolution, reminding us of the interconnectedness of all people. Dr. David M. Hotep's work highlights the African roots of humanity, calling for a re-evaluation of traditional Eurocentric historical perspectives. By recognizing the profound influence of African peoples on ancient civilizations, including those in the Americas, we gain a more inclusive understanding of history. This acknowledgement fosters a dialogue that honors the contributions of diverse cultures and emphasizes the shared heritage that unites humanity. Understanding the integral role that African ancestry plays in human evolution is essential for appreciating the diversity and interconnectedness of our species. Recognizing that traits often associated with African ancestry, such as dark skin, tightly curled hair, and broader facial features, are not anomalies, but the original blueprint of human diversity challenges historical biases and celebrates the foundational contributions of African populations to humanity. The widely accepted out-of-Africa theory posits that all modern humans trace their origins to Africa, where Homo sapiens evolved around 200,000 to 300,000 years ago. Approximately 60,000 to 70,000 years ago, some populations began migrating out of Africa, spreading across the globe. Genetic studies analyzing mitochondrial DNA, passed from mother to child, and Y chromosomes, inherited from father to son, have traced all modern humans back to common ancestors in Africa, mitochondrial Eve and Y chromosomal Adam. These studies underscore the immense genetic diversity within African populations, which surpasses that of populations outside the continent. This diversity reflects the long evolutionary history of early African populations and their adaptation to a variety of environments, showcasing a range of physical features, skin tones, and cultural practices. This rich tapestry highlights the adaptability and resilience of humanity, forming the foundation of the global diversity we see today. Understanding human evolution is incomplete without acknowledging that features commonly identified as black, dark skin, textured hair, and other phenotypic traits are the foundation of humanity. These traits evolved as adaptations to environmental conditions in Africa, such as high UV exposure, and provided the genetic blueprint for future evolutionary changes. As humans migrated and settled in diverse climates, these features diversified, creating the global spectrum of appearances we see today. This perspective fosters a deeper appreciation for the African roots of all people, emphasizing the shared heritage that unites us. Recognizing the central role of African ancestry encourages a shift away from outdated notions of racial superiority or difference, promoting empathy and respect for the diversity within our species. Exploring the African genesis of humanity reveals not only our origins, but also the interconnectedness that defines us. By appreciating the profound contributions of African populations to human history, we can challenge biases, foster unity, and celebrate the diversity that enriches our world. This understanding is not just about the past. It shapes how we perceive ourselves and others in the present, and how we move forward as a global community, grounded in shared ancestry and mutual respect. The physical traits that originated in early African populations are not just markers of identity, but are foundational to the diversity of humanity. These features, including darker skin pigmentation, tightly coiled hair, and broader noses, evolved as adaptations to the African environment. Darker skin protected against harmful ultraviolet, UV, radiation, while tightly coiled. Hair helped regulate body temperature in hot climates. As humans migrated out of Africa and encountered varying environmental conditions, these traits adapted. Understanding these traits in the context of human evolution is crucial for fostering inclusivity and challenging harmful stereotypes. Recognizing that traits like dark skin, coiled hair, and broader noses are evolutionary adaptations rather than markers of inferiority helps dismantle biases and promotes a more inclusive understanding of beauty and diversity. These features, deeply rooted in our shared ancestry, are reminders of humanity's resilience and adaptability. By appreciating the origins and significance of black features, we honor the legacy of African ancestors who laid the foundation for human diversity. This understanding fosters a sense of unity by reminding us that all human traits are interconnected and have evolved from a shared lineage. Celebrating these features enriches our collective perspective on identity, culture, and the interconnectedness of humanity. Acknowledging African ancestry has profound cultural and societal implications. It fosters a sense of connection among people of diverse backgrounds by highlighting our common origins. This awareness can bridge racial and cultural divides, promoting unity in a world often marked by division. By embracing our shared ancestry, we can cultivate greater collaboration, understanding, and empathy for individuals of African descent. This knowledge is particularly empowering. Understanding their ancestral roots fosters pride in their heritage, allowing them to reclaim their history and celebrate the contributions of African civilizations to humanity. This sense of identity and pride helps counteract societal stereotypes and prejudices, encouraging resilience and self-empowerment. The African continent, with its rich tapestry of cultures, languages, and traditions, demonstrates the complexity and beauty of human diversity. Exploring the varied expressions of African heritage fosters respect for different cultural practices and perspectives, enriching global society. Melanin, the pigment responsible for the color of skin, hair, and eyes, plays a critical role in human evolution. In early African populations, high levels of melanin were vital adaptations to intense sunlight, providing protection against UV radiation, reducing the risk of skin cancer, and preserving folate levels crucial for reproductive health. As humans migrated to areas with less sunlight, variations in melanin levels evolved to to suit new environments, influencing skin tone and other traits. Melanin's role exemplifies how human biology is intricately tied to environmental conditions. Its presence in varying levels across populations highlights the shared evolutionary history of humanity, while showcasing the adaptability that defines us as a species. Understanding the evolutionary and cultural significance of Black features deepens our appreciation of human diversity and fosters unity. By recognizing that these traits are foundational to humanity, we move beyond outdated notions of race and embrace a more inclusive perspective. This enriched understanding helps us celebrate the shared legacy of our African ancestors while respecting the unique expressions of identity across the globe. Through this lens, we can honor our interconnected history and cultivate a world rooted in mutual respect and appreciation.